So I got another one here again today that I'm going to review. This one is from PsychDep. This video is called Marriage Turned Men into Donkeys. And as a married man for over 22 years, it made me think there is some truth to it. But if you're a red pillar, you will avoid what this gentleman is talking about. So my friends, we're going to get straight into it. Hit the like button on your way in. Of course, book a session if you need some help from the older man. Listen, I've just implemented a new program where I'm going to take on five people only for full-time mentoring. That means that you will have access to my WhatsApp. You will get either 2 1-hour calls with me per month or 4 half-an-hour calls with me per month. But you will always have access to me if something develops instantly and you need my help or my guidance right there and then. I will be available. Within my time zone, of course. I'm not waking up at 2 o'clock in the freaking morning because you got an issue because you're in the West Coast. All right? Just saying. But anyway, I can only do 5 people at a time because that does require a lot of time from me on a daily basis. But if you want in on that program, drop me an email. Okay? And of course, if you want to start getting your YouTube or any content online, pick up my Content Creators Toolkit or my Digital Vault and start making some money today. All right? So my friends, let's get into this video. Let's start critiquing, have married men really turned into donkeys? I might. So anyway, let's do it.
You see him at the grocery store on Saturday morning, pushing a cart filled with organic kale and gluten-free pasta he'll never eat. His shoulders slumped, his eyes vacant, mechanically checking items off a list written in handwriting that isn't his own. This is the same man who once stayed out until 3 a.m. arguing philosophy with strangers, who quit jobs on principle, who drove cross-country on a whim just to see what was there. Now he stands in the checkout line, calculating whether he has enough in the joint account for the artisanal cheese his wife mentioned wanting, mentally rehearsing the apology he'll need if he forgot the specific brand of yogurt she prefers. You watch him and wonder, when exactly did the transformation happen? When did the lion become a pack animal? Walk through any suburban neighbourhood on a weekend and witness the great domestication in action. Men who once commanded boardrooms now seek permission to buy a beer. Former rebels who challenged authority now ask approval for every minor decision. Champions who conquered obstacles now negotiate for an extra hour of sleep. Today, I'm going to expose the psychological machinery that transforms independent men into compliant beasts of burden.
You know, I've seen these men. I've seen these men growing up. I still see these men today. They're part of the network of men that I see walking around in my neighborhood here. So I understand exactly what he's discussing. I see these men going with walks with their wives on an everyday basis and, just being that guy that's her sounding board, etc., etc. And I try to debate these men on life, etc., and I get massive pushback because they're so blue-pilled. It's oozing out of them. They see me as just the worst of the worst of men. Some of them even use that word, the toxic masculinity, the misogynist individual. Yet I know deep down, they know I'm right. But I'm saying to you gentlemen who do this sort of shit, and I'm sure that this video is going to hit a nerve on a lot of you, I want you to wake up because this never ends well for most men.
Because understanding this process isn't just about marriage. It's about recognizing how society systematically engineers male compliance through the promise of love. Over 15 years of observing relationships professionally and personally, I've witnessed hundreds of couples in their natural habitat. The pattern emerges so consistently it becomes impossible to ignore. Strong, decisive men gradually morphing into anxious approval seekers. Independent thinkers becoming echo chambers for their partner's opinions. Risk-takers transforming into safety-obsessed planners who check with headquarters before making any move. I've watched entrepreneurs who built companies from nothing, suddenly unable to choose a restaurant without consultation. I've seen military veterans who led troops in combat zones, now terrified of their spouse's disapproval over minor household decisions. The transformation is so complete, so systematic, that it appears engineered rather than accidental.
This is so true. And listen, my wife have attempted this shit on me a few times. She still does. It's almost built into her psyche. She's not doing it to be malicious or deliberate or nasty. It is who she is as a woman. As a wife, that's her programming. She saw her mother did it. She saw all of the people around her do it, the men that they are involved with. So it's part of the programming. It's on television. It's part of movies. It's part of the whole society. This domestication of men. Telling men that, hey, if you don't comply and be like this during your marriage and being a husband and a father, that you're immature, you haven't grown up, and all the other derogatory terms to make men feel like they're not men, they're still boys if they go contrary to the programming. I refuse to drop into this category. My wife keep telling me every single time, you don't do what I tell you to do. And I said, yeah, why should I? It's not as simple as that, of course. I can never explain the nuances to these discussions with you. She almost feels like in order for me to be a good husband that I should do what she says. And I'll repeat it again. It's not her trying to be malicious. It's just the way she is programmed.
The most disturbing aspect isn't the change itself. It's how these men seem unaware it's happening. They rationalize each small surrender as love, each boundary crossed as compromise, each freedom sacrificed as maturity. They're like frogs in slowly boiling water, adapting to each degree of temperature increase until they're thoroughly cooked. Before we dissect the machinery, let's acknowledge the seductive promise that lures men into this trap. Marriage sells itself as partnership. 2 equals joining forces to conquer life's challenges together. The marketing is brilliant. Shared dreams, mutual support, combined strength, unified purpose. Who wouldn't want a teammate for the ultimate game? But here's where the psychology gets sinister. Partnership implies equality, but the modern marriage contract operates more like a hostile takeover, disguised as a merger. One party gradually assumes control of decision-making, resource allocation, social planning, and life direction, while the other provides the labor to fund these decisions. The transition happens so gradually that men don't notice they're being managed rather than partnered with. First, it's our money, but she manages the budget. Then it's our social calendar, but she makes the plans. Eventually, it's our life, but she's the CEO and he's become the employee. Let's examine the financial architecture that enables this transformation. Modern marriage creates an economic dependency system that would make feudal lords jealous. Through joint accounts, shared mortgages, combined credit, and merged assets, men find themselves financially handcuffed to decisions they didn't make. The genius lies in how this dependency is packaged as responsibility. We need to save for the house. We have to think about the children's future. We can't be selfish with our finances. Each statement sounds reasonable in isolation, but collectively they create a financial prison where the man's earning power becomes disconnected from his spending authority.
And the thing is, right, the part of this that is vital for a harmonious relationship and for the growth of the family in a whole is essential. In other words, both parties have to come together and be conscientious about spending. But if the woman spending isn't curbed, but the man's is, then we know we don't have an equality there. We have a problem. Right? Because women like to feel that he's the one that has to control his spending, but on the other hand, she don't. That's where the problem comes in. In our household, I ensure that both of us are sacrificing financially so that we can both grow. And that's why I always advocate for the 50-50 relationship. But for those men who have been conditioned to think that, her money is her money and my money is our money, the house's money, those are the ones that are being conditioned to be the working horse or the donkey, so to speak. And I see this in so many relationships. And this is where feminism have actually failed women. Because in essence, that's how it was done in the past. But feminism never pointed that out to women. The men were out there doing the thing. All she had to do is take care of the house. Feminism have actually helped men by removing some of that beast of burden in the modern world. But a lot of men are still conditioned to think traditional, act traditional, while the woman gets to be modern. That's the difference in the contract between today's modern woman and traditional women of the past. So men are getting a worse off deal if he complies. to the old traditional blue pill version of a marriage. Men who have a red pill mentality and understand that, hey, you want 50-50? Then it's freaking 50-50. Don't tell me where I can spend my money. I'm the freaking logical one. And I'm going to tell you, hey, listen, if you're bringing in 50% of the income in order for our household to freaking grow together, then you cannot go out there and do excessive amount of spending. You got to curb that shit and start putting something into the pool. This is just another way of men who have been so blue-pilled and operating under this hyper-feminized world that he no longer have any command in the house whatsoever. And I'm telling you, gentlemen, you keep this shit up, and all she needs is just that one message that's going to convince her that, hey, she's not happy in that relationship and she should get out, and she could take all of his money and go and have a great life and travel and doing all these nice things. And she don't need him there because he's just become a puppet, a workhorse. And when he's reached that point where he can no longer function, why should she stick around? Why should she stick around and become a nurse to this workhorse when she could walk away, take most of the money, and still get a lot of D out on the street and have fun in her old age, while he's left to just keep paying the bills?
He works longer hours to fund a lifestyle he didn't choose, in a house he didn't pick, filled with furniture he doesn't like, to maintain standards he never set. His labour becomes the engine that powers someone else's vision of the good life. He's not building his dream. He's financing hers. The psychological impact is devastating. When a man's effort becomes divorced from his agency, when his work serves goals he didn't set, he experiences what psychologists call learned helplessness. He stops fighting because resistance feels futile. He accepts his role as the economic engine and finds meaning in being useful rather than being himself. Perhaps the most effective control mechanism is the systematic dismantling of the man's independent social network. This process begins subtly, with gentle suggestions about time management and relationship priorities. Don't you think you spend too much time with your friends? Wouldn't you rather spend Friday night with me? Your buddies are still acting like college kids. The language sounds caring, even logical. Why would a married man prioritize friendships over his spouse? But this framing creates a false choice. It positions male friendships as competition rather than complement to marriage. It reframes loyalty as scarcity, as if loving his friends somehow diminishes his love for his wife.
And that's why, gentlemen, women hate the manosphere. They hate it because the manosphere is a place where men come together and share ideas. And once you're sharing ideas, once you're sharing that masculine energy, there's no way she could compete against that. That's why they fear it. That's why it's condemned on mainstream TV, in movies, on Netflix, on Disney, on all the freaking channels. They fear the manosphere. And what is the manosphere? Just a collection of men chopping it up. Just a collection of men sharing ideas. Just a collection of men supporting each other. But if you isolate that man, that's when the problem arises for them, because they have lost control.
Gradually, the man finds his world shrinking. The weekly poker game becomes monthly, then occasional, then non-existent. The weekend hiking group gets replaced by household projects. The spontaneous hangouts disappear under the weight of scheduled couple time. His support network evaporates just when he needs it most. This isolation serves multiple control functions. Without external perspectives, he has no reference point for whether his situation is normal. Without male friends who remember his pre-marriage self, he loses connection to his authentic identity. Without independent relationships, he becomes emotionally dependent on his spouse for all social needs, turning her into both his jailer and his only source of human connection. Once isolation is complete, the reshaping process accelerates through constant low-level criticism disguised as improvement suggestions. This isn't the explosive anger of abusive relationships. It's the steady drip of dissatisfaction that erodes confidence like water carving through stone. You should dress better. You need to eat healthier. You watch too much sports. You're not ambitious enough. You should call your mother more. You spend too much on hobbies. Each comment taken individually seems helpful. Collectively, they communicate that who he is naturally is insufficient. The brilliance of this system lies in its deniability. When confronted, the criticism transforms into concern. I'm just trying to help you be your best self. I want what's best for you. Isn't improvement what relationships are about? The man finds himself defending his right to be himself while simultaneously feeling guilty for resisting change.
That's why, gentlemen, you got to stay mentally strong under these conditions. Always, always, always get in the gym. Get in the gym, lift something heavy, keep the testosterone high. Always look physically better than her. When women get into marriages, they tend to get fat because they've now found their man. They don't have to work that hard. And women love food more than men. Women tend to be more emotional eaters. Hence, that's the reason why they usually gain weight once they get into marriages. The disciplined women know better. There's two types of women who actually take care of themselves once they're married. The ones who understand that they still want to stay sexy for the outside world in the event she wants to jump ship and leave her husband. And the other is the one who wants to stay sexy for her husband. Usually these two women respect themselves enough. Of course, some of it could be narcissism as well. But you can judge that based on how many photos she posts online. If she has an Instagram channel that's just constant in a bikini or showing off her body in all of these different photos, she's pretty much just advertising herself. If she don't do any of that, but she just keeps herself in really good shape, then more than likely she's doing it for herself and for her husband and family.
This constant correction creates a psychological state called external locus of control. Instead of trusting his own judgment, he begins seeking approval for increasingly basic decisions. Should he buy this shirt? Is it okay to grab drinks after work? Can he sleep in on Saturday? His internal compass gets replaced by an external approval system that never quite grants permission to exist comfortably.
Yeah, you see, I go out and I buy the shirt. I'll buy the shirt and I'll come home and say, what do you think, babes? You like this? And she will give me her honest opinion. I'll take the opinion of a couple other people, some guys, etc. If they like it, then I know I've made a right choice. But I do like her opinion and I value her opinion simply because she has really good taste. So I do take her opinion as well when it comes to certain shirts, clothing, etc., which I rarely buy. And because I rarely go anywhere that requires me to be fashionable, these situations tend to be limited. But I don't ask permission to go anywhere. I tell her I'm going and I will tell her when I'm returning. And that's simply for security reasons. I don't ask permission to go anywhere. So gentlemen, make sure that you apply some of these disciplines that I'm trying to encourage you to take, because once you have to ask for permission to go anywhere, you're no longer a free man. You're in prison. Never ever put yourself in prison.
Watch how marriage systematically eliminates the activities that once brought men joy, purpose, and identity. This happens through the application of utilitarian logic to every pursuit. Does this activity generate income? Does it improve our home? Does it advance our social status? If the answer is no, the activity gets categorized as waste. Video games become childish. Sports become pointless. Music becomes noise. Reading becomes antisocial. Working on cars becomes dirty. Any pursuit that doesn't directly benefit the household gets gradually phased out through scheduling conflicts, budget constraints, and social pressure. The psychological impact extends far beyond lost entertainment. These activities often represent the last connection to pre-marriage identity. They're the spaces where men feel competent, passionate, and autonomous. When these disappear, men lose access to the experiences that once made them feel alive. The replacement activities, home improvement, yard work, family obligations, serve household utility but rarely feed the soul.
I don't necessarily agree with that, because it does feed my soul when I go outside and I do something in the yard, or I fix something, or I create something, because it's my house as well. Yes, I'm doing it for my family, and that's important because I see my utility as a man as vital for the growth of our family. So to say that it's a bad thing, I think sort of define a man's role as simply him being selfish or self-centered. So even though I understand what he's saying, don't lose your identity by just serving, you got to hold a piece of yourself back. And this is why I always define marriage as two intertwined rings. You know when you have two circles and then they overlap, and then one ring is you and the other ring is her, and in the middle is the family or your marriage. You never lose part of who you are, and she should never lose part of who she is, because that's what we loved. That's what we loved about each other. And it's important for each of us individually to hold on to that identity. But in the middle is the marriage, where the two circles entwine. That is the part that requires sacrifice. That is the part that requires building. That is the part that requires giving up part of who you are. So the video is actually truthful, but it's quite one-sided. Then what's the relevance of being with another person if you're going to be selfish and self-centered?
Men find themselves busy but not engaged, productive but not passionate. They become efficient machines for generating value for others while starving their own spirits. Perhaps the most psychologically damaging aspect of modern marriage is how it transforms basic adult autonomy into a privilege requiring negotiation. Grown men find themselves asking permission for activities they once took for granted. Can I go out tonight? Can I buy this item? Can I visit my parents? Can I take this job? The transformation happens gradually. It starts with consideration. What do you think about me doing X? Then it becomes consultation. Is it okay if I do X? Finally, it becomes supplication. Please let me do X. Each step feels reasonable in isolation, but the trajectory leads to the complete surrender of adult decision-making authority. The request for permission isn't just about the specific activity, it's about establishing who has the power to grant or deny basic human freedoms. When a man must seek approval for normal adult activities, he's no longer operating as an equal partner, he's functioning as a subordinate requesting privileges from a superior. This dynamic creates what psychologists call learned helplessness. When someone's agency becomes dependent on another's approval, they eventually stop exercising independent judgment. They internalize the idea that their desires are secondary and their preferences don't matter. They become psychological children in adult bodies. The marriage industrial complex has perfected the art of guilt-based motivation. Every male desire that doesn't serve household utility gets reframed as selfishness. Want time alone? You're neglecting your family. Want to pursue a hobby? You're wasting resources. Want to maintain friendships? You're prioritizing others over your spouse. This guilt operates on multiple levels simultaneously. There's practical guilt. We can't afford that. There's moral guilt. That's not what good husbands do. There's social guilt. What will people think? There's emotional guilt. It hurts me when you choose that over us. No matter which direction the man turns, he encounters another reason to feel bad about his natural desires. The genius of this system is how it makes the man complicit in his own oppression. He's not being controlled. He's choosing to sacrifice for love. He's not being manipulated. He's being considerate. He's not losing himself. He's growing as a person. The guilt makes him the architect of his own cage. Over time, this constant guilt erodes the man's ability to distinguish between reasonable compromise and excessive sacrifice. His moral compass gets recalibrated to always prioritize others' needs over his own. He develops what therapists call pathological selflessness, the inability to advocate for his own well-being without feeling guilty. Marriage doesn't just change men's behavior, it systematically dismantles their core identity. The process begins with the merger of interests. We like hiking. We enjoy wine. We prefer staying in. Individual preferences get absorbed into couple preferences, and dissent becomes disloyalty. The man's unique traits, perspectives, and passions gradually fade as he adapts to maintain harmony. His sense of humour changes to match her sensibilities. His music taste shifts to avoid conflict. His opinions moderate to prevent arguments. He becomes a diluted version of himself, optimized for compatibility rather than authenticity. This identity erosion creates a profound psychological crisis that most men don't recognize until it's nearly complete. They wake up one day and realize they can't remember what they used to enjoy, what they used to believe, or who they used to be. They've become supporting characters in someone else's story. The tragedy isn't just personal, it's relational. The woman who fell in love with his confidence, ambition, and distinct personality finds herself married to a pale imitation of the man she chose. She often becomes frustrated with his passivity and compliance.
This video sort of pushes the whole idea of marriage into a dark space. I would never discourage you from getting married because, in essence, it's part of who we are biologically. We're designed to find a mate. Find a mate, procreate, build a family together, and raise our offspring to carry on our DNA to the end of time. But in that process, we find a mate that we can actually live with, that we can actually grow with, we can build with. I understand where the author is going here when he's saying men become so complacent and compliant. The reality of it is that also occurs on the female side as well, but only if the man maintains his frame. Because if it reaches to a point where the woman is constantly in charge and she becomes the arbiter and the author of the marriage, then we get a one-sided relationship where she takes control. And we know exactly what happens once a woman controls the marriage or any relationship. She leads it to its ultimate demise because a woman cannot respect any man that she can control. The essence of what keeps a woman interested in a man is a man who's stronger than her. And that's why it's important for men to stay in their frame as men and not be controlled by the woman. So marriages can work, but unfortunately too many men are so blue-pilled that they have fallen into the very essence of what this author is discussing. I've seen them. Broken men. They don't know that they literally just dug their own grave and they're just alive on the ground. But they're not dead. They're just going to be buried alive. Just every day trying to freaking catch the last breath of air, not knowing that eventually it's going to run out. So all I'm saying to you, gentlemen, wake up and realize that if you stay down this path, even though it feels comfortable and normal, it's not going to end well for you. It won't. Not in today's modern environment. And my job here isn't to scare you, gentlemen. It's to wake you up, to make you realize that there's a reason why the divorce rates are so high. Because this video just described the men and the environment that most of them are now in. And the women have said, yeah, I'm out. Listen, that was about a third of the video that I've played. Go over there and watch the rest of it. I will pin the link here in the description of this video and also at the top of the comment section. All right. So go over there and support this channel. I love this channel. They have some great content. So my friends, like the video on the way out. Let's have a conversation. Let me know if you're in this position as a married man. Okay. So until tomorrow, my friends, remember, whenever in doubt, always ask an older man. See you tomorrow. Cheers.